If there is one thing Solarpunk does exceptionally well, it is selling the fantasy of building a technological paradise amidst floating islands. However, the reality is that if you place machinery, crops, and generators haphazardly, your base quickly descends into chaos. That is precisely why today I want to show you how to create a perfect, aesthetically pleasing, functional, and fully automated base, the kind that makes every resource work for you. Because in this game, once everything begins to connect, you stop merely surviving and truly start building the future. To me, the perfect base in Solarpunk begins long before raising the first wall. It is born from choosing the right spot. I would always attempt to build at a strategic point, preferably close to water, because this simplifies gameplay from the very start and leaves you surrounded by useful resources to grow without suffering from constant travel times. Since the game places you on starting islands with safer terrain and early access to food and stone, choosing this first corner wisely makes progression significantly more natural. When examining the terrain, I prioritize practicality over aesthetics. The ideal approach is to find a clear area, free of trees or structures in the way, as this provides clean space to set up foundations, organize machinery, and avoid that cramped base feeling during the opening minutes. And since the early game also revolves around beds, storm protection, planting, and storage, setting all of this up on functional terrain makes a substantial difference. Another aspect I consider essential is proximity to the most critical resources. Remaining close to a constant water source helps immensely, but it is also worth considering access to stone, early game food, and later on, islands with denser ore deposits, especially in the mid-game. I like the concept of setting up a base that functions well initially, but remains connected to your future evolution, rather than becoming a beautiful yet useless spot after a few hours. Honestly, I believe building higher matches the core premise of Solarpunk perfectly. Beyond the fact that the game allows you to elevate foundations and better utilize high terrain, this helps keep the base more organized, providing a clearer sense of planning and defined space for expansion as you scale up the construction. In a world formed by floating islands, choosing an elevated point or even an island with more available surface area strongly conveys the feeling that your base is not just an improvised shelter, but the hub of all your automation and exploration. Before placing the first block, I like to visualize the entire base operating in my mind. Frankly, the most common mistake in survival games is building on impulse and later realizing that production is miles away from storage, that agriculture has obstructed movement, and that everything has turned into a puzzle that is difficult to reorganize. Therefore, to me, planning first is what separates an improvised base from one that truly feels designed to last. I would always divide the base into clear zones, an area for production, another for storage, and another for agriculture. This keeps the workflow much more natural, allowing you to harvest, store, and craft without constantly walking back and forth. Since Solarpunk deals with construction, farming, and automation in a world of floating islands, this organization makes the base feel alive without turning into a visual or functional mess. Another fundamental factor is leaving surplus space from the very beginning. In automation games, a base is never truly finished because a new machine, a new system, or a new expansion requirement always emerges. Thus, I prefer to build a bit more open and even empty at the start, preventing the classic issue of setting everything up beautifully only to have to crush your own base 2 hours later to fit the next step. Planning before building is what prevents rework and saves time down the line. I like to think of it this way. The more organized the base is from the first minute, the less time you waste dismantling structures that were already operational. In Solarpunk, where the enjoyment lies precisely in watching your structure grow in a clean, efficient, and sustainable manner, building with a vision for the future makes all the difference. The number one priority, without a doubt, is energy. Seriously, without energy, the base does not function, automation does not run, and you remain stuck in manual survival mode for much longer than you would like. From the start, I would always focus on acquiring the most accessible generators that provide a solid foundation for growth, generally those utilizing solar and wind power, which are core to the game's concept. In the opening minutes, I would go straight for solar panels and wind generators because they align best with the idea of a sustainable energy world on floating islands. They're cheaper, easier to maintain, and provide a constant flow of power without requiring complex resources. Later, once you gain better access to ores and technology, it becomes worthwhile to add more advanced generators while always maintaining the solar and wind foundation as the heart of your base. What I like to do when organizing energy distribution is design a centralized system with clear branches. I place the generators together in a dedicated area near a control panel or transformer, and then distribute the power through lines extending to each machine, automated crop layout, and storage system. This prevents the base from looking like a tangle of wires and makes it easier to identify where power is lacking or when you need to expand. A common mistake I see, and one I have made myself, is placing machines too far from generators without considering how the power will reach them. Another error is attempting to rely on a single generator for everything, which leaves the system fragile and causes power shortages when you increase demand. There's also the issue of failing to review the base after expanding, leaving new machines without connected power. To me, the secret is always having more than one active generator from the start, keeping distribution organized, and revisiting the base's power infrastructure as it grows. The game was born with this premise of automation in a world of floating islands, and when you begin to see trees being chopped, ores being extracted, and food being harvested without you needing to chase after them, the sense of progress changes entirely. Regarding which resources are most worth automating, I always prioritize food, wood, and stone in the beginning, as they sustain practically everything: construction, tools, planting, and even certain machinery. Later, as you progress, automating more specific ores and mid-game resources begins to make all the difference. To create an efficient chain, I like to think of it as a small factory. Each stage has a clear place. I start with collection machines, choppers, miners, water collectors, connect them directly to processors, defrosters, furnaces, food processors, and then route everything to central storage. The important thing is to keep the flow clean without detours or randomly scattered machines, and to leave extra space to add more units as demand grows. The time saved compared to manual collection is massive. At the start of the game, you can spend hours collecting wood, stone, and food manually, trapping you in a survival routine that hinders growth. When automation steps in, you stop spending time harvesting and start spending time planning, expanding, and testing new ideas. In Solarpunk, where the fun is building something sustainable and efficient, this difference in time is what makes the base feel like true automation rather than just a pile of machines dropped in the same place. When you possess dozens of resources, processed parts, and construction items, wasting time searching for something amidst randomized chests is the kind of frustration that saps the fun out of automation. I always try to think of storage as the brain of the base. Everything must have a correct place and be easy to locate. When organizing chests, I like to set up a centralized system, with all chests grouped in a dedicated area near where the machines deliver items. This prevents you from having items scattered across the map and makes it much easier to review what you have, what is missing, or when you want to expand storage. I also prefer to arrange chests in clear rows with visual identification. For example, color, position, or even different blocks above each category, so that you already know where to pull from without needing to open everything. Categorization is what truly makes the system work. I always divide items into basic resources, wood, stone, water, processed resources, plates, wires, parts, food, and construction materials. This division helps keep the workflow clean because each type of item has a clear destination and you stop mixing unrelated items. Since Solarpunk is a game of construction and automation, having this organization makes all the difference when you are assembling new machines or expanding the base. The greatest benefit of the system is not wasting time searching for items. In survival games, you already lose a lot of time running, collecting, and processing. If storage is poorly organized, you end up spending more time hunting for an item than actually building. To me, a smart storage system is what allows you to focus on what truly matters: planning, automating, and growing the base without feeling like you are always looking for something you do not even know the location of. If you want a base that truly functions, automating food is the first step that changes everything. I only stopped treating food as just one more thing after I understood that without constant production, the entire automation process grinds to a halt. When you have a system that cooks, harvests, and delivers food without you needing to run around, the progression of the game shifts pace. You begin to think about expansion, new machines, and exploring islands, rather than just not starving. I always start by choosing crops that are fast, yield well, and fit cleanly into automated lines. Initially, the focus is on planting the basics that resolve hunger and sustain the base without requiring complicated resources. Later, once you have more control, I add plants that generate ingredients for more elaborate meals or slightly more advanced processes, giving you room to grow without relying on random gathering. The secret to maintaining constant production is setting up multiple farming areas connected to automatic collectors and, if possible, to food processors. I always plant more than I currently need, ensuring that when one harvest cycle ends, another is already finished or underway. And, of course, ensure that water and energy are well integrated, because without this, production becomes unstable and the system loses its rhythm. The impact of this on your evolution is enormous. With automated agriculture, you do not waste time searching for food and begin to use that time to expand, test new ideas, and explore islands. This moves you out of the basic survival phase much faster and opens room for more complex systems. In Solarpunk, where the idea is to build something sustainable and efficient, having constant food is what makes the base feel alive and working for you, rather than just a bunch of machines thrown together. The moment a base in Solarpunk begins to come alive is when the machines work on their own. It took me a while to understand this. I had a beautiful base, but I was the engine for everything, running around to collect, process, and store. Only when I connected production, processing, and storage into clear lines did things begin to flow without me needing to supervise every step. The logic I always follow is simple: collection, processing, and then storage, all directly linked. A woodcutter sends material straight to a deforester, which delivers to a processed wood chest. A miner goes to a furnace, which drops plates into a resource chest. A plant collector goes to a food processor, which delivers to central storage. The secret is that each stage has a definite destination, and items do not get lost in the middle. What truly changes is the elimination of repetitive tasks. Previously, you would be harvesting, cutting, mining, and cooking manually, trapped in a survival routine that prevents growth. After establishing automated lines, you do not waste time doing the same thing 10 times, and instead use that time to plan, expand, and test new ideas. In Solarpunk, where the enjoyment comes from building something sustainable and efficient, having machines that work on their own is what transforms the base from a shelter into a system that lives for you. Expansion is the moment you transform an ordinary base into something that genuinely feels like a megabase. I always think the best time to expand is when you already have stable energy, organized storage, and automated lines running without requiring constant supervision. When the base already lives on its own, then you can begin thinking about growing without losing control. The secret to adding new modules without creating a mess is maintaining the zoned structure you already created. I always add new modules in adjacent but separate areas, keeping the same logic of production, processing, and storage. This prevents the Megabase from turning into a tangle of machines and wires, and makes it much easier when you need to review or expand even further. For beautiful and efficient layouts, I like to think of shapes that follow the terrain of the floating island. A U or L layout helps keep everything organized with clear pathways between zones. I also prefer to use different blocks for each area, creating a visual identity that helps separate production, agriculture, and storage without needing signs or markers. What makes a Megabase worthwhile is not just the size, but the efficiency. When you expand with planning, maintaining clear zones, and well-connected automated lines, the base continues to function smoothly even with significantly more machinery. The biggest mistakes that destroy an automated base in Solarpunk begin long before you notice anything is wrong. One of the most common is building everything too tightly packed without leaving space between machines. This makes the base look cluttered, disrupts the flow of items, and later, when you want to add something new, there is no room and you have to dismantle half the structure. Ignoring the power grid is another error I see frequently. Many people place generators far from machines or attempt to rely on a single generator for everything. When demand grows, the power drops, machines stall, and the entire automation setup loses its rhythm. The ideal approach is to have more than one active generator from the start and keep distribution organized so that each machine receives stable energy. Automating too early or too late can also be an issue. If you automate too early without a solid foundation, you end up investing in machines that will not function well and waste time reorganizing. If you automate too late, you remain stuck in the manual collection routine and fail to evolve quickly. The sweet spot is when you already have energy, storage, and basic production functioning. That is when you begin setting up the first automated lines. Finally, failing to plan for expansion is the mistake that most commonly traps a base at its initial size. Many people set up a beautiful base, but one so closed off that it is impossible to grow without dismantling everything. The secret is always to leave surplus space, maintain the logic of zones, and think about how the base will grow down the road. In Solarpunk, where the fun is building something sustainable and efficient, avoiding these errors is what makes automation truly work from start to finish.